But I think for women, from my understanding, and again, I'm not saying that I'm right, just this is what I've observed. It's not like that. It's kind of like you need to bring what I bring to the table in order to be like that first filter step. If you don't even do that, like we're not talking. So not being willing to engage with the other, so to speak, and trying to learn. What do you want? What do you need? What would you like to happen? Let me share the same. And then let's see if we can bring these two together in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
And I'll just say me, like I used to have a list. I used to have, like, I remember I used to be like, oh, well, if you're not like 6'3", 6'4", like I don't want to talk to you. We also just can't have unrealistic expectations of what our partner can be like.
So there's this very interesting dynamic. It's not a dilemma, it's a dynamic. In my mind, again, outside looking in, between I maybe feel the freedom, this is how I kind of interpret it. Maybe women feel in a lot of cases like they have been stifled in terms of their opportunities to live and lead full lives, to be fully autonomous, to be fully free, to do the things that they want to do. And I would agree with that statement. So maybe there's like this general push to like push the boundaries almost as far as it can go. I'm gonna go as hard as I can in this direction because you guys have held me down. And now that I feel like the shackles are kind of off right now, I'm gonna run as fast as I can and as hard as I can in this direction, irregardless of what happens. And then on the flip side, there's us, the guys, who, of course, we still want to connect. We still want to build those real connections and relationships with you all. But it's getting harder because the expectations change. The rules change. The way you engage and you approach us approaching you is changing. And it's very difficult and it's very hard for us to know how to bridge that gap of how we're supposed to engage meaningfully with the women like you out there, especially because all of these discussions and these rules are implied. They're not actually spoken. They're not actually stated. There's no book there.
What kind of rules though? What do you mean? Like,
so rules of engagement, speaking of things like how do you approach a person? So I'll give you an example. Sort of back in the day, to age myself, I remember it was very much okay, although it was very awkward and very terrifying, especially as a young man, to like, you'd probably meet like a young lady at the mall. If you didn't meet them at school, right? School is probably like the default. I'm talking like school age, maybe like high school.
Okay.
You'd probably meet them at the mall. And you had to learn to build up some courage to actually speak to this person. You have to be okay with being rejected because you don't have any right for her to, just because you approach her doesn't mean she has to say yeah. So you have to learn how to deal with that, right? Which to me, that's always been the case, and that's fine because that's normal. The reason why I'm making this point, so hold that for a moment. What I see a lot of now, and what I'm hearing a lot of now, when I talked about expectations, is the expectations seem like they've raised themselves to a point where it sort of alienates the vast majority of potential partners from a woman to a man's perspective. Okay. Meaning, and again, I know this is deep, so I want to hear your feedback because I'm trying to like elaborate on this as much as possible so we're all on the same page. In my experience, and from what I've noticed about other people who are trying to navigate this divide, for a lot of women, the more that they are able to produce and earn and take care of themselves, which is great, right? It also makes it harder because it shrinks the possible dating pool of who they will go for. Not because those men don't exist. It's because they're kind of unqualified now. Does that make sense? And for men, it's very much the opposite. The more we ascend, the better that we do. We don't naturally just alienate those women. We will still go for somebody, whether it's different socioeconomic status, different career path, maybe no career path. It's more about their traits, their qualities, the way they were raised, what do they want. And if you can make those things align, then we will make it work. But I think for women, from my understanding, and again, I'm not saying that I'm right, just this is what I've observed. It's not like that. It's kind of like, you need to bring what I bring to the table in order to be like that first filter step. If you don't even do that, like, we're not talking. We're not even having a conversation. So it fundamentally sort of isolates all these other potential partners out there because, again, they don't qualify anymore. I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
I don't, like, I hear you and I understand, just because like I feel as though, and it's so funny that our conversation has come this way, because my friends and I talk about this all the time, just because you know, there have been situations where we've had conversations with people and they would say the same thing. They were a lot harsher with the way that they would say it, but
because I think delivery matters. Yeah,
exactly. And so I feel like I okay, because I just had a conversation with my friend about this the other day. I hear what you're saying, but I think it's just because, okay, well, you know what, let me just give a personal, like, let me look at it from a personal perspective.
Sure.
I don't necessarily care. I'd say I personally don't necessarily care about just, I don't want to say I don't care about success or whatever, but the person doesn't necessarily have to be like a super successful type person for me to necessarily be interested in them. For me, I care about the emotional aspect of things, but I also care about like the drive.
Can I ask you real quick, just to make sure, because I want us to also define those things. What do you mean when you say drive?
Drive, as far as just like, you don't necessarily have to never mind. Because I was gonna say, like, I'm not necessarily saying I'm looking for somebody that is on my level, but like, you have to have some sort of like motivation or want to, like, you know, do more or be more, or like, you know, do what you want to do. But that's also to an extent, because I have dated people that have been so focused on continuing to elevate and things like that to where it has not worked out because they couldn't provide like the emotional aspect for me. And I feel myself like getting kind of off track a little bit, but
no.
I would say for the most part, like, I hear what you're saying. But it sucks that, like, it seems like I feel like nowadays, like, that's kind of what the majority is seeming like. Although, you know, there's still a couple of us out there that don't necessarily care about that.
No, sure. We're definitely not profiling.
Oh, yeah.
When I make that statement, I'm definitely not trying to say everybody's like that. I only make that point because
it's just very common now.
I think it's a very common experience, and also because, and I'm saying this uniquely because men historically, we don't talk about things in general. So we're definitely not going to talk about these type of things that we might be struggling in, because it's already like in the field of emotions, which we're already very nervous about speaking on. But it doesn't mean that we're not feeling them. It doesn't mean that there's not a lot of, you know, lonely guys out there who would love to be somebody's partner, but maybe are not being afforded the opportunity, not because they have no drive, they have no ambition, but they're not kind of at this level that maybe a lot of women out there may expect this man to be at now. Maybe the ball has moved where maybe average, like at whatever age they're at, their ability to earn, provide for themselves, take care of themselves, like they have all that, but the standard has maybe risen to a point that it's not as common for them to hit that point until much, much later in their life. And so it kind of creates this dilemma, or like a vacuum, if you will, of, again, qualified candidates. I think I say it in that way because that is sort of how dating is. Like, we absolutely filter people out.
Oh, yeah.
So it's okay to say that. We're not being disrespectful, because we're allowed to all want what we want, right? My only point is that, and again, it goes back to the outcome. You can want what you want. I can want what I want. Everybody can want what they want. But the longer you go and you're not getting what you want, at what point do you look at yourself and recognize I need to maybe change something? And it's not terrible for me to consider compromising on some of these things that maybe I'm holding up so high that don't really matter.
Yeah.
And I'll just give you some really small examples. These are very superficial, but these things are here. Like height, build, income to a certain degree. I do feel like I've come to understand it a little bit more from a woman's perspective. I think it matters, especially if the guy maybe wants to have his wife at home more or have her be the primary caretaker of the children, then I absolutely think his drive, his ambition, his motivation, it matters, because you need to be able to provide that stability. And if I'm the woman, like I'm kind of hitching my wagon to yours, so I need to be able to have confidence in you. That totally makes sense. Yeah. Right. So those are all the compromises that I would say that I would hope that we would make, but I don't hear a lot of that on the other side and from a lot of the other guys that I speak to, and I think that's where a lot of the frustration might be coming from.
Yeah, I hear you, because I feel like a lot of people still have a lot of like unrealistic expectations. Like I hear about this a lot. Like like there was a series. This pastor, his name's Michael Todd. He like had this whole series on like relationship goals and things like that. And that was something, because I was in a book club and we read his book about it. Yeah. And that's something that we had discussed, like as far as like people, and I'll just say me, like I used to have a list. I remember I used to be like, oh, well, if you're not like 6'3", 6'4", like I don't want to talk to you. And I like, you got to take a step back, because like he's not going to, like, I don't know, that's where a lot of the compromise comes in. Because the person that you might end up with, the person that is going to treat you well, somebody that you're really going to create a connection with, they're not going to have all of the boxes. Correct. And I think it's important for us to remember, like, we don't necessarily have to settle, but we also just can't have unrealistic expectations of what our partner can be like. So like, I will agree with you on the salary standpoint, just because like right now I'm making the most money that I've ever made or whatever, but I still am in the social work mental health field. So it's like, if I'm looking for a partner, I do, want someone that would, like, if we're discussing like long term as far as like marriage and family and things like that, that is something that I want to have, as far as like a man like be the provider and stuff like that, just because, personally, I don't necessarily want to work for 30 more years. So, which by the way, and again, I'm not I don't shame people on either side of the spectrum, right? I think that's okay. I think that's totally okay to say, like, I don't want to have to. I'm not saying you're suggesting this, but like, I don't want to do backbreaking work. Like, I would love to be taken care of. I think, and again, I'm just being fully transparent here. I think there's nothing wrong with understanding and acknowledging some of the biological differences that exist between us, that we're kind of suited for different things. It doesn't mean that we can't do things that the other can do. Not everything. There are some things that each of us obviously cannot do. Yeah. But I don't like to go down that path, because I feel like it's a foolish path to take. It's basically like, okay, you say I can't do it, prove it. I just feel like that doesn't help advance the conversation. That's great if you just want to argue, and I'm not in the business of arguing. I'm in the business of trying to resolve complicated issues and trying to understand. A better question to me would be, yes, I can do it on my own, but what's a better strategy for the long term? Is to do it together. Yes. Life is meant to be with somebody else. It's way harder to go through life on your own. I'm gonna go back to, I haven't said this yet here, but I've said this on other episodes before. This idea of independence, right? I don't celebrate that. This is just me personally speaking. I don't celebrate that as that's something to be celebrated. I say that to me is a bare minimum. If we're all adults, what's the alternative? Are you a child? Do you need somebody to take care of you? So I don't look at it as in like this celebration of like, I need to be independent, blah, blah, blah. I look at it and say, no, to me, a part of a healthy, functioning human adult, male, women, it doesn't matter. You can take care of yourself at bare minimum, right? And I'm not even meaning that in an economic sense. I'm saying it, let me hit it from the mental, emotional health side. If you don't take care of yourself now while it's only you,
What do you think is going to happen when you have a partner?
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen when you have a family? You have additional stress and responsibilities that you've never been accustomed to. You think you're going to get better at taking care of yourself, or it's going to be harder to take care of yourself?
And a lot of the struggles that you deal with are probably going to come up, and it's, I don't know, it'll just go back to like the issues we were talking about with family earlier. It's just going to be like a never-ending cycle.
Correct.
So I agree with you 100% on that.
So I see how that happens. And so, and again, I'm not anti any one group or any one type of person. I'm just simply pointing out, like, the conversation doesn't start or end there. That can be a part of it, but there's so much more substance to that I think that we're just missing when we talk about this.
Yeah.
And I'm very sensitive to both sides and thinking about, what do men want, what do women want, and trying to, again, really be a bridge, really trying to understand, I am not a woman. I'm never going to be a woman. I want to learn, what is it that you all have concerns about, that you worry about, that you want for the future. And it's going to be slightly different for each person, but there's a lot of things that are inherently common because a lot of it is biological, particularly when we talk about family building and child rearing. And for men, there's certain expectations that's pretty common for us too, that for the most part, many of us are okay with being providers, being leaders to a certain degree, not that you steamroll your partner.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talking points I hear people use, great for creating frustration, but not great for actually resolving stuff. It's not either or. When we have these very nuanced discussions, we do them very black and white. We live in extremes. It's like, women have ultimate freedom, women got to be housewives that have no rights. And it's like, come on, man. There's a whole spectrum here of stuff in between. Stop trying to paint it in one way or another.
Yeah.
The same way for men. It's like, people use the word, and I've finally started discussing it, toxic masculinity. Is everybody toxic? No. And a lot of people don't even know how to define what that even means. Or, I'm like a pushover, and I'm not assertive, and I don't know how to get what I want out of life, and I'm lazy. There's a whole lot of stuff in these different ranges. I want us to talk more about what we call the gray, right, in mental health. There's a lot of stuff that's gray. It's not black and white.
Yeah.
So when we talk about these nuanced discussions around relationship building and expectations, I'm trying to decouple and really unravel a lot of why it's so hard now for people to connect with each other. Is it because men and women are fundamentally that much more different than we were 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 100 years ago? There's some changes culturally, sure. Access to certain things, sure. But are we really that much more different than we were? I would stand to say no. Yeah. I think for generations, we've been more or less the same, with some minor changes over time. And again, it doesn't mean we don't celebrate the improvements that need to happen, because they do.
Yeah.
But getting back to those family units, how do we make those happen? I don't hear a lot of people talking about that. I hear a lot of, even in like politics and things like that, a lot of, we live in our own little bubble and we just keep selling the same stuff to each other. So not being willing to engage with the other, so to speak, and trying to learn. What do you want? What do you need? What would you like to happen? Let me share the same. And then let's see if we can bring these two together in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Because, I mean,
I don't know. It's just, I feel, I agree with you when it comes to, like, I feel like fundamentally strip, everything away. I feel like we really are not that much different from, the past generations and things like that. But I feel as though just the stuff that we've been exposed to, the stuff that we have gone through as a society, just it's distorted the way that we, approach situations, the way that we look at situations. And so I feel as though I'll, just tie it back to not even just social media, just media and the things that we are all just consuming on a day-to-day basis. I don't know. I just really feel as though, in some aspect that definitely has definitely had an effect on the way that a lot of men and women interact with each other in the way that they go about their relationships. So
I'm with you. I'm with you. And I try my best, because I'm a therapist. I try really hard to consume information and content from all sides. because I think that's, that's where you really get more of the whole picture, right? Looking things from a holistic perspective. So I'm certainly not going to like only listen to guys say like, oh, well, this is how women are and blah, blah, blah. And hear women like, men ain't this and men ain't that. I'm like, number one, we need some personal accountability, which we've already discussed. But a lot of us are also, to your point, and again, I'm not anti-social media. I do think it needs to be much more carefully understood, and the impacts need to be fully appreciated, particularly for parents of young kids.
Oh, yeah.
Or young teens. But it does create a perception that may not always be accurate. And I think we need to hold truth to that.
Yes.
I can give another example. And I don't live on social media. I use social media as a tool that I believe that it is, and that's it. When I say I don't live, I mean I don't scroll. I just use it and then I get off because I just don't care enough about it.
Yeah.
But I understand the impact that it can have, the audience, the reach, all of that. But I know for a lot of folks out there, it is a primary source of information. It's a primary source of information that they use to shape the way that they deal with other people, that they create these narratives of how they think they should be treated or not be treated. And again, I think so many of us are not getting out of that comfort zone.
Yep.
To really have your ideas challenged. Not because we need to argue, we need to fight, but if you think what you think is really accurate, then listen to an opposing viewpoint and actually determine maybe there's something I can take away from that encounter that might be applicable to how I see things now. Maybe I wasn't considering those things before.